When I tell people about my professional background, they tend to ask some variation of the following two questions. How did you go from professional hockey to food writing, and do you eat out all the time? By answering these questions, I hope you'll learn more about my work as food editor at the Post and Courier. Food has been a passion of mine for quite some time, but hockey was there first. I started playing in my hometown of Pittsburgh when I was 3 years old, and I didn't stop until I was 30. The sport took over my life during those years, in a good way mostly. As a kid, I spent weekends traveling to tournaments and summers at hockey camp, and my dream was to play Division I hockey. That meant packing my bags at age 16, saying goodbye to my family, who was kind enough to join us today, and moving to Iowa, of all places, where I lived with a billet family until I was recruited to play at Boston College. I left BC with 2 national championships and a liberal arts degree, and spent the next 7 years playing hockey professionally in 7 different cities, everywhere from Stockton, California to Kansas City, before I signed a contract with the Washington Capitals that thankfully brought me to Charleston. Woo! Love it. By this time, my interest in food had grown from a hobby to an obsession. Writing about places I was eating helped me escape from 15-hour bus rides and suffocating pressure to perform. Without expectations, I submitted an application to Erin Perkins at Eater, and she thankfully gave me the opportunity to write 1 or 2 stories every month. That number started to grow as I improved and made connections with other publications. I started writing for the Charleston City Paper and Charleston Magazine, where I worked as an editorial intern. I would write after games on the bus, in coffee shops after practice, or in my hotel bed while my roommate was taking a pregame nap. I enjoyed the jabs from teammates asking if I was going to review the soggy slices of pizza we were sharing after a road game, and I just kept doing my thing, which actually helped me play better on the ice. I'd been toying with the idea of leaving the professional hockey ranks for a career in journalism, and when the pandemic ended the 2020 NHL season, that moment came more abruptly than I expected. Days after deciding our canceled season would be my last, I switched gears and accepted a job at the Charleston City Paper. To get to that point, I had worked tirelessly to improve my writing and knowledge of food, but my true on-the-job training came from March to July 2020. And I'll be honest, those first few months were kind of tough. And looking at that beard I decided to grow, I was clearly taking it harder than I thought at the time. Working from home, there wasn't any water cooler talk or coworkers down the hall to answer my question. I was posted up at my kitchen table with AirPods in, conducting some heavy interviews about restaurant closures, financial hardships, and supply chain shortages. All the while, I was really struggling with my decision to retire from hockey. I'm thankful for my family who helped me push through those moments of doubt, and 18 months later, I was completing a round of interviews at the Post and Courier. I accepted the food editor job the next day. We've made it to question 2. How often do you eat at restaurants? Several times a week, but that's not all that goes into the job, thankfully. For every hour I'm in a restaurant, I spend 5 conducting interviews in our office or outdoors at places like PechaKucha Pig Farm in Dorchester, South Carolina, while dodging hogs and goats who will eat your shirt. Don't get me wrong, I love eating in restaurants, but it's the people behind the food that motivate me to pull up stories in progress on my phone when I can't sleep at 2 a.m. And 2 individuals help explain what inspires me today. First is Carol Wicker, who I recently spent an afternoon with in a rural community outside of Columbia. He spent the last 50 years collecting heirloom corn, cantaloupe, watermelon, and squash seeds that he plants in a garden on his property. As we looked through his stock of seeds, Carol shared their origin stories, and one in particular stood out. Carol's great-uncle Otto Lightsey was stationed in Africa during World War II. Otto adored the North African cantaloupe, so much so that he collected 7 seeds to bring home with him when he returned home to the U.S. Nervous that they wouldn't make it through customs, he taped the seeds to his toes, concealing them in bandages, protecting a fake injury. Thankfully, the seeds made it home, and Carol's family has been planting African cantaloupe ever since. My afternoon with Carol is a reminder of how food can connect us to more than just our senses. It can also introduce us to cultures that are different than our own, which brings me to another person. He was just on the screen, Nico Cagalanan of Mansuetas, the Filipino pop-up he named after his grandmother. Yeah, we all love Nico's food. He's awesome. For those who are unfamiliar, a pop-up is a service in which chefs utilize temporary locations such as breweries and established restaurants, to experiment with new concepts. I recently shadowed Nico for an evening to see what it's like to host these events. And spoiler alert, it's really hard, intense work, as many people in here know, that takes days of preparation. The hours Nico spends braising meat, rolling lumpia, and experimenting with sauces by himself before pop-ups makes a difference for his customers. By trying mansuetas, some have reconnected with their Filipino roots or tasted sisig and adobo for the first time, like I did when I first wrote about Nico 4 years ago. Nico is one of many Charleston chefs whose influence on me extends beyond the plate. By now, you might be wondering why I haven't mentioned restaurant reviews. Restaurant writing is naturally a meaningful part of our newspaper's coverage. Readers want to feel informed when selecting restaurants and where to spend their money. I was recently listening to one of my favorite food podcasts, and one of the hosts mentioned an old quote: "Criticism is love." It made me think about what it means to write about and critique food and the set of principles that guides my work. Small restaurants representing countries from across the globe sparked my interest of food during my childhood, when my parents would seek out off-the-beaten-path places on weekend hockey trips. When the Post and Courier gave me the opportunity to launch my own premium newsletter, Charleston's Menu, I chose to focus on finding wonderful mom-and-pop restaurants in unexpected places. Independent restaurant owners, like the ones featured in Charleston's Menu, put their own money and livelihood on the line to make their dreams come true. Sometimes they risk everything to serve the food and drinks they're passionate about. My written words about all local restaurants carry weight, and I don't take that lightly. That's why my writing and work will always come from a place of fairness, respect, and ultimately, love.